let's do a walkthrough of the machine so that you know what all of the parts are, and a couple of the kind of more important pieces about how to use one of these antique machines. This is called the balance wheel right here. This machine was originally a treadle machine, and so the and you can tell from, if you've used a treadle machine once, you can tell the balance wheel is aligned with the bobbin wheel. Let's look back here. This motor, oh, I got some dust from this belt is brand new, so it's shedding just a little bit. This motor back here is held on with two screws, one here and one, I don't know if I can get in there and show you. I don't think I can. And one underneath, directly below this one. The motor is much newer than the machine, but it also is self-contained, and these are fairly universal. So if it ever quits on you, you can absolutely just undo those two screws, take this off, chuck it, replace it with a new one, and it will run just fine. Likewise, the light that's back here sits in this back plate. Basically, if you take the screws off, I think this only has one screw right here. When you take that off, the light has a corresponding ring that sits here. And so again, if the light ever dies on you and it's not just the bulb, you can remove that, replace it with a new one. These are still sold. And again, you're good to go. It's all ready to run. The motor is hooked to, the power comes in here, and then runs out this cord here. All of this also can be replaced if ever it is necessary. The one thing you need to be careful of is that you'll notice these cords sit kind of close to the belt. So every once in a while, just look to make sure that they're not rubbing against the belt. That's not going to create an immediate problem, but it will cause wear in the wiring, and you don't want that. So just, kind of make sure that they're not rubbing up against one another, and it'll be fine. All right. This right here is your stitch length. It does not have indicators on it, which is kind of interesting. On the other hand, that does encourage you to try your stitches first on a scrap of the fabric that you're planning to use, because the difference between just a tiny turn of this will give you a different stitch length. Shorter is toward the right, longer is toward the left. Okay, over on this side, one other adjustment device you need to know about is the tension, which is right here. Again, there are no indicators on it, and it's just turning this little knob. It does not take very much to change the tension. This controls the upper tension, so this thread that comes through the needle. The bobbin tension is controlled on the shuttle. There's a little teeny tiny screw on there that you can turn, and there is instructions in the book on how to do that. Generally, you shouldn't have to do that. I did have to do a little bit of adjustment on that particular shuttle in order to get a balanced stitch, but you shouldn't have to mess with it until you've used it quite a bit. Like everything else, and everything else mechanical, it'll move around a little bit eventually. Again, tighter is to the right, looser is to the left on this upper tension. You will have to adjust this for different types of fabric. So again, practicing some stitches on a scrap piece will really make a difference. One other thing about these antique machines, two things. First of all, when you start and stop sewing, you cannot reverse. And on modern machines, reverse is used to lock the end of the stitches and keep it from pulling loose. You can't do that on this. While yes, that's it is kind of a pain in the butt, there is a way to handle it, and I will show you that. But it's not as critical as you might think. If your seams are going to cross one another at some, at an edge, then you don't need to worry about locking them, because the crossed seam, like in the corner of something, those will hold one another in place, and that's fine. But again, I am going to show you how to secure your seam if you need to. The second thing you need to know is that starting, you want your bobbin thread to come underneath the presser foot like that, and you want your upper thread to be sitting free. You want them heading off to the right, and you are going to need to use a hand to kind of hold them out of the way so that they don't get caught up in the feed dogs and create a snarl in there that will really mess up the beginning of your seam. So a couple little tricks to make life easier. These are also good practice. That is also a good practice with modern machines, but it's critical with an antique machine just because of the way that the feed dogs work. The bobbin itself is this fun little guy, right? Oh, focus, there we go. And this is an original to the machine, so this is about the same age, as far as I can tell, as the machine. But you also have a lovely shiny pack of reproductions that work just as well. I have a set of these for my treadle, and that uses the same system. They work just fine. So you're going to start with having the thread on the spool, obviously. You're going to run the end through this upper hook right here, bring it down here, and then you're going to wind that end just around the bobbin. And I'm going to do that off camera because I need both hands. But you're going to wind it around the bobbin so that it rolls to the back, toward the back of the machine. Okay, we're going to look at filling the bobbin. For this, you'll notice there's no belt on right now. So first, we're going to put the belt on so that it goes around the motor shaft, the balance wheel, and the bobbin wheel here, which is going to be interesting to do with one hand, but we're going to give it a try. Okay. There we go. Okay, that wasn't terrible. Okay, so it goes around all three. I also have the light unplugged back here because the plug is round and it rubs up against the belt back here, which can cause things to bind up a little bit. Not ideal, so let's not do that. So I've unplugged the light and I've put the belt on, and the next thing to do is on the balance wheel here to turn the choke forward until it's loose. When you do that, then theoretically anyway, this should not go with the wheel. So let's roll that back just a little bit. No, still. Okay, anyway, it'll be slower if not completely stopped. All right, so I've got it wound so that it's rolling toward the back of the machine. You're going to put it in so that those little nubbins fit into the cradle here, and the other end sits into this pin. You can pull it back from here to be able to seat it correctly. Okay, so it's seated, rolling toward the back of the machine. Now I'm going to pull that thread in between the upper and lower hooks. And there's a little bit of slack, that's okay. I'm also going to pull the whole mechanism, it's on a bit of a hinge, forward so that this has got some good tension on it. And then we're gonna hit the pedal, and you can watch how the bobbin winder winds on. There we go. I think this is really fascinating. This little heart shape right here controls the moving back and forth. So you're going to want to go ahead and wind it fairly full. I'm not going to sit here the entire time. You're going to want to wind it fairly full, but you want to make sure that it doesn't go past the edge of the ends of the bobbin. It will not stop automatically, so you do have to pay attention to how full it's getting. Make sure that it's actually winding fairly evenly across the width of the bobbin. It does have a tendency to fill more on this side than the front side. So, you know, use that back side as your gauge for when it's full. And I'm looking at it there. And I can still see a little bit of the edge of the bobbin end. And that's probably pretty good. This holds a surprising amount of thread, more than modern bobbins do, so it will be longer before you have to replace it, which is fantastic. Threading the machine is actually fairly simple. And again, it runs from here over to this hook here, comes around this tension disc, hooking through this loop, then comes up to the needle bar, down through this little guy over here, through this hook, and then feeds through the needle at the bottom. We're going to use this angle because the kind of the trickiest parts are in the best view, even though you won't be able to see some of the other parts that are more obvious. Okay, so the thread is coming through that top hook, and it's going to come through this tension disc. Now there are, in the tension disc, this is the spot you're aiming for in there. Ooh, I'll do a little bit more dusting in there. This is the spot you're aiming for. That is where you want the thread to sit. So I'm just going to grab it, pull it around from the right underneath, and then you want it to hook into this little wire hook. And when you do, that'll add just a little bit of tension on it. You're then going to go through that, the needle bar hook at the top there. It's got a nice little slot in it, which makes it really easy to thread. Then you go down through this little wire hole jobby. There we go. And come down. Give yourself enough to work with. Hook it around that hook there. And then this is going to probably take me several attempts, but and then you're going to thread the needle. The hole in the needle, it really, really, really matters which direction the thread runs. Remember that this hook is intended to keep it in alignment with the hole in the eye of the needle here. So you want the thread to be sitting on the outside, and then it's going to come through the hook through the needle this way and exit back toward the right. So 1 second while I try to Okay, I've switched back to the smaller belt that goes just between the balance wheel and the motor shaft, and I'm going to tighten this back up by rolling it toward the back of the machine, and then we'll talk about how the bobbin sits underneath the machine. So there's this really cool little mechanism under the bed, and this is the shuttle race. This is where the bobbin sits in the shuttle, and then this goes back and forth in an arc like this underneath the machine, and that is what creates the locking thread for the bobbin underneath. So it does, like I said, it does sit in a shuttle. That's this little guy, like that. And you can kind of tell how it sits into the race, but let's kind of walk through how to fill the shuttle. So if you look at the shuttle, there is a hole in the top. The bobbin sits inside there. And what you're going to end up doing is once you drop the bobbin in, you're going to bring the thread down through that slot, bring it around the hook, and then you're going to pull up on it so that it comes up underneath this weird little bar here, and it should sit, oh, I'm trying to do this with one hand, it should sit so that the thread comes out of this little hook here and goes up. So let me attempt to show you what that looks like. Okay, so now we're going to put the bobbin into the shuttle. Once you've loaded the bobbin, you want to hold it so that the thread is coming off from the left side and moving over to the right. You want about 4 inches of loose thread, maybe a little bit more, whatever. But this is the direction you need to hold it. Kind of grab the thread a little bit, hold it so it's upright, take your shuttle, hold that so it's upright, drop the bobbin directly into the shuttle, drop it down, and then put your finger over the top so that it doesn't pop out. Once you do that, you can start to pull the thread over to the slot, slide it down, it's going to come around that hook, and then as you kind of maneuver it, it'll come over into that space. Now, you want that thread to be pulled over to the left side of that hole where the hook fastens in. So if you pull up on this just a little bit, you'll feel it pop and it'll pull over to that left side. You still want it to be on the right side of this little rounded bar here. There is a space that sits right here. When the needle comes down from above, this is where it fits and picks up the bobbin thread from right there. So this is a correctly loaded shuttle. Now we're going to place the shuttle into the shuttle holder. I have the shuttle carrier as far forward in the machine as it will go. And again, you just need to roll the balance wheel towards you until it is in this position. And then make sure that your thread is coming off kind of towards the back. And this flat side here is what goes up against this curved side of the machine bed. So you just slide it in so that the point is down into, there we go, is down in the carrier, and it all is sitting flat. It will be a little loose, but not hugely loose, and that's loaded correctly. When you go to take this out to either change color of thread or to refill the bobbin, etc., this little button right here pops the shuttle up, and then you can grab it with your hand and take it out. Pretty clever little design, actually. All right, got the needle threaded. It is coming again from the outside, the left side, through to the inside, the right side, and it is ready to roll. We're now going to bring the bobbin thread up through the feed dogs. That's these guys down here. And to do that, I'm going to hold the upper thread. I'm going to turn the balance wheel toward me. Don't hold it real tight, just keep it from flying around. And just run the balance wheel until it's made one stitch, essentially. And you'll start to feel less tension, but when you pull on it, it'll bring up a loop from underneath that you can then grab. And then you have both of your threads up on the top side of the machine. You can close the, I should put this one back on. You can close the little slider gates. To put those in, they just sit in the grooves there and slide in. That's it, nice and simple. Okay, it is now set up, threaded, and ready to run. Okay, so let's take a look at sewing a seam. I've got my fabric in under here, and I'm going to drop the presser foot. Never sew with the presser foot down. Never run the machine with the presser foot down unless you have fabric in there. You will mess up the machine. Okay, I am going to, as I mentioned, I'm going to hold those threads with my right hand just behind the machine. And you can guide this with your left hand, but also I have found that it is, actually, I'm going to do this with my left hand. I have found that it is a little bit easier in starting because that leather belt tends to slip just a tiny bit. To have a hand free to give the balance wheel just a little bit of a nudge as I'm starting a seam. So, okay, so I've got my fabric is, my machine's all threaded, my fabric is there, my presser foot is down. I know that my needle is properly loaded with the flat side of the needle on the inner side, on the right side. The thread is coming from the left to the right, and I'm holding my threads. Okay, so I'm going to press down on the pedal. I gave that balance wheel just a little bit of a, and there we go. Running. And then I'm going to give it a stop. Okay, so I have my seam done. I'm going to pull the balance wheel forward until this is at the topmost position, and so is the needle. It's as high up as it can go. And then I'm going to grab my fabric snips, although actually you've got a thread cutter on this. That's nifty. I'm going to lift the presser foot from the back. I'm going to pull this out, not hard. You don't want to tug real hard. And then there is a thread cutter back here. I don't know how sharp it is. Let's find out. And, well, theoretically, there's a thread cutter. I wouldn't trust that. Okay, it's not sharp. Don't use it. And then I'm just going to give, actually, I want to give that a little bit more. I'm going to give them a little bit of room. So I've got a couple inches of thread there. And snip it. And I've got a seam. So if you look at it, that's pretty flat. There's no loops on this side. And on the back side, it's also fairly flat. There's no big loops. There's no, it's not pulled up into the fabric. It lays smooth. That's what you want. When your thread is looped on one side or the other of the fabric, it's because your tension is off. And most of the time that is your upper tension. So if the loops are on the top, then you need to tighten that. You need to turn it to the right. If the loops are on the bottom, then you need to loosen this by turning it to the left. Start small, do small adjustments, test it again, do another small adjustment, test it again until it's all lying flat. Okay, now I mentioned that these threads are not locked. So if you were to end a seam just in the middle here, it would easily pull out. You can see how that last couple of stitches are a little bit looser than they are in the rest of the seam. And so to fix that, what you'd end up doing is bringing the thread from this back side forward to this side by just threading it through a hand needle, run it through here, and then tie a knot with those two threads right at the end of the seam. The nice thing about that is that it leaves that seam end very clean and very smooth. It is not nearly as bulky as the back stitching that you do on modern machines. But again, the only time you need to do that is if that seam is going to be kind of on its own. It isn't crossing anything. It isn't crossing itself. If it's crossing itself, it's fine. If it's got another seam crossing the other way, or even at a diagonal, that's fine. The only time you need to do this is if it's just going to kind of hang out there on its own. So grab a hand needle, thread this guy through that hand needle, come up underneath this stitch to bring the two threads to the same side, tie them off, snip the ends, good to go. Okay, the last thing we need to talk about is maintenance on this. So, and that really takes two forms. One is, well, three. One is just keeping it dusted and clean. Do not use water. It will erode the finish. You actually clean it with sewing machine oil. And I got you a little bottle of sewing machine oil that will last you a surprisingly long time. Put a little bit on a scrap of like t-shirt material or on a cotton ball and just rub the machine down. That will protect the finish, and it will clean off any of the dirt. And you can do that in all of the edges and weird little spots. The second is cleaning the feed dogs. Now, these little guys down here, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more. These little guys down here really love to eat lint. And so you will end up with all kinds of dust and lint that collects underneath here. And what will eventually happen is that will slow the action, and it gets down like way in those little holes. That will slow the action, and it will cause your thread to bind up. It'll cause all kinds of snarls on the bobbin end. The stuff won't feed properly. You'll see a whole lot of weird stuff. So if things aren't working right, that's one of the first things to do, is to get the little brushes and dusting kit that I got you and clean all of this out. Again, you can just slide these guys and get in underneath here, or undo the screw right here to get in and clean in and around that. The third thing, and this is important, is oil. These machines need oil about every 8 hours of sewing time, or if it has sat for a long time. So if it's been 6 months since if it's been a couple of months since you've sewn, before you use it, you need to oil it. And there's a diagram in the instruction book for where to oil. But basically, you need to think of it as any place that moves, it needs oil. That includes in here. There's some spots in here that need oil. It slides back down. You can take this front plate off with this screw right here. It goes right back on. But there's some spots in here that need oil, and there are places in underneath the machine to lift the bed of the machine. Take out your biggest muscles, undo this hook right here, and then this whole thing lifts up and tilts toward the back. I can't do it one-handed. It will be a mess. And there are some places underneath that you need to oil. There is also, and this is kind of weird, but right here, do this with the awl. Right here, there's a little felt thing. This is not lint. This is here on purpose. And this helps keep the shuttle race oiled by just slowly releasing oil from this little felt wick that's in here. There is another little felt wick in with the stuff I got you, but you shouldn't need to replace this little guy for probably, I don't know, a couple of years. They last quite a long time. If you see it start getting really cruddy and nasty looking, then it's time to just pull it out and put a new wick in. This needs to remain saturated with oil. So if it is not, again, whenever you oil it, you just basically want to add enough that it sits up on top. Let it soak in for a second. I just oiled this, so it, it doesn't really need much right now. Let it soak in for a second. Once it stops soaking, then come in and just blot it. Again, the oil is really good for the machine finish, so you can just kind of, rub it around. And that, then you're not wasting it also, but then you've got a nice clean and oiled machine. And I think I'm going to get that back spot on the motor that was all dusty and dirty while I've got this ready to go. One other minor thing to let you know about, and that is the motor has a smell. It's kind of a hot electric smell. It's normal. If it is super strong, then you should maybe be worried, especially if something's binding up, or it's not, it doesn't sound like it's running happily. But as long as it sounds like it's running happily, there will be a little bit of a motor smell that you will get from it. Don't worry about it. It's okay. There is no maintenance you need to do on these guys, other than to keep as much as you can to keep the dust out of them. So occasionally a light shot of canned air, but don't go to town on it, because the canned air will bring moisture in here, and that's death on the motor. So I just wanted you to know about that, because I didn't want you to worry that maybe it was messed up or not functioning correctly. That little bit of smell, yep, that's normal. And again, this machine is over 100 years old, well over 100 years old. No, not well over. It's I think I dated it to 1920, so like 105 years old. And it still really runs beautifully, and looks pretty nice. So I hope you have a really good time playing with it. Okay, one of the things I'm including with this is a buttonhole maker. This is an attachment that goes onto the machine. This part basically clips around the presser foot, and there are several buttonhole template thingies that go inside here. I do strongly recommend reading the instructions. They are useful, and they're all here, but you also can find videos on YouTube for how to use these guys. All of them are just a tiny bit different, so see if you can find one for the white. But they essentially work the same way, just there's a couple of little tricks and things that can differ from piece to piece. So this will automatically make buttonholes for you should you want to make something with buttonholes. And this plate, although it comes with this buttonholer, and so I'm not taking it out. Does not fit on your machine, so it can just stay in there by itself. It's happy there, and no one will know any different. Got a bunch of little nifty little attachments for you that'll all go in this little tin. These two are zipper feet of various sizes. So for narrower zippers or wider zippers, this allows you to get right up close to the teeth. And the little guy back here allows you to adjust how wide you want that to be, how far away from the needle you want it to be. So those are handy. These are modern attachments, and so they're all nice and shiny. This one is also a modern attachment. This is designed to help you maintain a consistent seam allowance. So this little screw goes into, there's a hole in the bed of the machine. That's the flat part at the bottom. So that, and then you screw it down in so that you can measure from the needle to this edge, and that will be your seam allowance. And by where you place this, it'll be wider or narrower. It just helps you guide the fabric to maintain a consistent seam allowance. These are the older attachments. These are all probably somewhere, if I were to date them accurately, I don't know that I'd be quite right, but they're probably somewhere around the 1915, 1920 time period. This is a narrow hemmer. Do look up videos online for how to use it, but it allows you basically to create a very narrow hem by just kind of feeding it through. And again, this is just a presser foot attachment. It'll replaces the presser foot on the machine. This is another narrow hemmer. They're just different widths. And another one. And another one. Because, like I said, they're all different widths. So those all there. This one is for free motion quilting. So you, again, it's a presser foot replacement. You put it in, and it's just got that single hole there. This is intended so that there's no catching. With that open presser foot, you can potentially catch edges. This keeps you from doing that. And there are definitely ways to do free motion quilting on the machine that you have. Again, YouTube will be your best friend in figuring out how to do that. So those are your little attachments.